The 6 Lies of the Fibbler and Silencing the Gossip Queen operate as a sort of fascinating transition between one era of Bibleman to the next. I would hesitate to call them good episodes, but they do introduce a lot of concepts that would become Bibleman staples. These episodes actually establish a conflict for the characters to experience, instead of just having all the kids sing and then Bibleman shows up to lecture everyone. Yes, there is still singing from the kids, and of course Bibleman having a conflict within an episode isn't anything new, but these episodes go out of their way to have the villain Bibleman faces be directly involved with a struggle the kid or kids are going through. Even though Bibleman has more of a direct effect on the conflict of the episode, he's still not much of a character. But that doesn't stop the writers from creating some strange new aspects to his character. But we'll get into that. We might as well get into the episode covered within this video, The 6 Lies of the Fibbler. In the opening scene, we are introduced to Gate Manor, which functions as a Bible cave of sorts for Bibleman. He has a lab and different advanced tech, and of course, the Bibleman costume. It's nice to actually get an establishment of who Bibleman actually is, or at the very least, where he operates out of. I think they realized that the first 2 episodes didn't really give the audience a good idea of who Bibleman was, or how he operated within the world. These simple visuals at the beginning of this episode don't tell us a whole lot, but if you're familiar with the character of Batman, I think you can infer that Bibleman is supposed to kind of function in a similar way. But what would a Batman-like character be without a tragic backstory? Well, fortunately, after the opening scene, we get introduced to how exactly Miles Peterson became Bibleman.
Miles Peterson, a man who had it all. Still, something was lacking. Miserable, alone, his spirit beaten, Miles Peterson gave up. Then in his darkest hour, the words of a single book began to change his life.
Bible.
And at last, Miles Peterson felt the burning desire to know God. Inspired by the Word of God and equipped with unyielding faith, Miles pledged to fight evil in the name of God. As Bibleman.
This intro would be played at the beginning of most future Bibleman episodes. Sure, it's a bit overly dramatic and maybe even a little too dark for the target audience, but it makes an effort to actually tell us who Bibleman is, which the previous 2 episodes didn't do at all. And honestly, I just kind of love it. He finds a Bible in the mud. Like, what? It's just fantastic. Bibleman isn't the only thing this episode wants to establish. During the theme song, we see the names of characters coinciding with their image. 3 of the characters listed, Callie, Ashley, and Nikki, appeared in Big Big Book. Callie and Nikki were also in Back to School, but I don't believe Ashley was present if memory serves me correctly. Along with these 3 are 2 new characters, Ryan and Ricky, who did not appear in the previous 2 episodes to my knowledge. These are the main cast of kids for The 6 Lies of the Fibbler and Silencing the Gossip Queen. I imagine they might have wanted to have a consistent group of kids present throughout the series, but the show soon went into a new direction, and these kids never showed up again. Anyway, let's talk about what's actually in the episode now. The 6 Lies of the Fibbler focuses on the character of Ashley, the youngest member of the youth group. She shows up late to rehearsal on somebody's front porch one day and lies about why she was late. We learn that this is something she has done before, as the rest of the youth group kids berate her for it.
I had to take care of my mom.
Come on, Ashley. Last time you said you had to take care of your cat.
I think my cat might have given what it had to my mom.
Those excuses are lame. Why don't you just admit you're lying?
Wanting to apologize for being mean to her earlier, Ryan decides to give Ashley a cassette tape that has part of the music that will be used for the group's performance that night as a sign of trust. Ashley forgets to bring the music and once again lies, saying that Ryan never gave her the music. Ashley quits the group and feels estranged from her friends because of her behavior. But Ashley is not the only culprit in this scenario, as the twisted villain, the Fibbler, seems to be using his green breath powers to cause Ashley to lie. Hey, I was editing the video and I realized I failed to mention that the villains can't be seen by regular people in Bibleman. Only Bibleman and his sidekicks can see them. He doesn't have any sidekicks in this episode, but in future episodes, his sidekicks will also be able to see the villains. And there are some instances where the kids can see villains, but then other times they can't. And there's probably some example of regular people being able to see the villains in Bibleman, but generally, in Bibleman, the villains can only be seen by Bibleman and his sidekicks and no one else. I just wanted to establish that, and that's sort of pretty consistent throughout Bibleman. I realized that there was some stuff I was going to talk about in this review that wouldn't make any sense unless you knew that the villains couldn't be seen by regular people. I mean, they never explicitly say this, but after years of watching Bibleman, I can kind of infer that I think that's what they're communicating. Like I said, it's inconsistent, and in some instances, the kids can see them as well as probably regular people. But generally, Bibleman and his sidekicks are the only ones who can see the villains. So yeah, just wanted to establish that. Sorry, back to the video. So Bibleman has to step in to stop the Fibbler and teach Ashley a lesson along the way. I don't think this conflict is very good. I mean, at least there is a conflict, but it all feels sloppily done. Yes, Ashley is lying, but there is no benefit to her lying. She doesn't lie in order to give herself some sort of advantage. She lies just because. If Ashley didn't lie in this opening scene, she'd still be late for rehearsal. There's no way her lying is going to change that. Sure, she is still giving bad excuses, but she probably is just feeling really defensive. When she doesn't bring the tape Ryan gave her to the church performance, her lying and saying Ryan never gave it to her might get her away out of her responsibility. I mean, the rest of the group could believe Ashley and just think Ryan was trying to pin the blame of forgetting the tape on Ashley, but we never see the conflict resolve. We later see Nikki tell Bibleman that Ashley quit the group, so we can infer Ashley's lying about the tape had a negative effect on herself. Which means that all the lies Ashley tells in the episode only work to her detriment and not her advantage. I'm not saying every story that involves lying has to show the lie working to the advantage of the person who told the lie, but I think that's a good way to communicate this concept to children. The lesson should be that even though lying can work to your advantage, you still shouldn't do it because it's wrong, and the lie will eventually catch up to you, and you'll realize that telling the truth was probably the easier option in the long run. Now, I know morality is more complex than that, and there are situations in life where lying might actually be the right thing to do, but I'm talking about this concept through the lens of a children's show. And I think having the lesson be that lying is wrong, even if it seems like it will work out in your favor, is a simple and concise lesson you can teach to kids. But if you never establish a situation where lying works to the liar's advantage, then I don't really know how you're going to do a simple children's story about lying. I just don't know what they're trying to communicate with this episode. It seems the issue with Ashley's character is that she's untrustworthy and isn't good at remembering things or is always late, not necessarily that she is lying. Her lying seems to happen because of other issues, but when the villain of the episode that is having a negative effect on the child is named the Fibbler, I can only assume that we're supposed to infer that Ashley's problem is that she's a liar. The way Ashley's conflict resolves is also pretty bland as well. Ashley's moping around in the park, and then Bibleman comes up to her and says, "Hey, why don't you just ask your friends for forgiveness?" And then Ashley goes and asks her friends for forgiveness, and they forgive her. And then they sing a song about forgiveness. There's nothing really wrong with how the episode resolves. I just think it's built upon a conflict that is rather ill-defined. Or, in other words, the story is just eh. It feels like the writers just wrote down a first draft and didn't think whether or not the anti-lying message really fit with what they actually wrote down. But hey, maybe the writers were focused on making a better conflict for Bibleman, right? 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 That's stupid. I'll say this. Bibleman's inclusion in this episode feels a lot more justified than his inclusion in previous episodes. This Bibleman is a lot more like the Bibleman that I am familiar with. Bibleman fights the villain, and he helps the kids out. Bibleman functions perfectly fine in this episode, but he's still not much of a character. They give him one scene alone in this episode that takes place after he has had an encounter with the Fibbler, and it's just so he can look at an online villain directory so he knows the Fibbler's name.
Gotcha. So, you're called the Fibbler, huh? Rather nasty character too, aren't you? Thank you, Lord.
What? He doesn't even do anything with this information. It's not like he uses his Batman-like detective skills to track down the Fibbler. He was just concerned about what his name was, I guess. During their first fight, the Fibbler could have just said, "Hey, Bibleman, I am the Fibbler," and then this scene would have been completely unnecessary. I mean, the scene as it is feels unnecessary. It doesn't tell us anything about Bibleman other than he has a computer where he can find villains' names out. But I think the most surreal thing they do to try to make Bibleman more of a character is make him a school teacher. They don't explicitly say he's a school teacher in this episode. In Silencing the Gossip Queen, you do see him teaching, so I can infer from that future episode that in this past episode he was supposed to be a teacher. I mean, I assume he's supposed to be a teacher in this episode because I don't know why he'd be in a school randomly. He just shows up in this classroom where the kids are talking about Ashley, and then he does this.
Nikki? Come here a minute. Is everything okay with you guys?
No, it's not, Mr. Peterson.
Oh. Well, I'm sure everything will work out for the best.
I don't know.
Well, I'm sure it will. Go on, get to class now.
Wow, how do you go from "I really care about your problems" to "yeah, whatever, can you leave me alone" that quickly? I just don't know why they made him a school teacher. I get they want the character to interact with the youth group as someone other than Bibleman, but couldn't they have just made him a youth pastor or something? They could have done this exact scene, but just set it in the church, and Miles is there and happens to overhear the conversation. But, I mean, they didn't give an explanation for who he was or why he knew the kids in Big Big Book or Back to School, so I don't see why they need an explanation now. Just have him be a creepy guy who hangs around kids. That's probably easier to explain than the fact that a school teacher has a house that looks like this. The Fibbler is the first villain in this series to have an effect on one of the kids in the episode. His ability seems to be that he will say whatever he wants a kid to lie about, blow green smoke in their direction, and then the child will repeat what he said.
What's the deal, Ashley?
I, had to take care of my mom. A 1, a 2, a 1, a 2, 3.
I had to take care of my mom.
This brings up a lot of questions about whether or not the child is directly responsible for their actions within the episode. I mean, they're being manipulated to do these things, right? I guess the way I look at it, and this may not line up with what the writers intended, is that the Fibbler is enhancing a trait that is already present through his magic green smoke breath. Meaning that Ashley may have a habit of lying, and the Fibbler is just there to keep her lying with his influence. I think this way of thinking about the villain's effects can apply to most of the villains in Bibleman, though there are likely exceptions. The performance by Bill Murphy is campy, which lines up with how the villains have been portrayed so far, and how they will be portrayed in the future.
Ooh, Fibbler, you are good. Oh, really, I can't take all the praise.
What a sad-looking group of kiddies. Hardly a glimmer of joy in the place. Perfect. 1 down, 4 to go. Whoa.
But there is a certain eeriness to the Fibbler, which may have more to do with the editing of the show than the actual performance. Let me explain. In this scene, the pastor goes out to tell the congregation that the service is ending early. Then this happens.
I am sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but there has been a problem with the second portion of our youth group presentation, and I'm afraid we're going to have to reschedule.
You realize, of course, that this is all your fault. Oh, you're far too kind.
While I believe the scene is intended to be comedic, there is no goofy music playing to enhance the comedy. In fact, there seems to be some sort of weird ambient music playing instead. Now, goofy music isn't necessary for a moment to be comedic, but without any indicators to tell the audience this scene is comedic, I can only really guess the intention of the scene. I don't know, maybe the makers of the show wanted this to be a creepy scene and not a funny one. Obviously, the Fibbler's look is inspired somewhat by the character of the Joker, and this scene honestly comes off like something the Joker would do, so maybe that was their intention. I don't know. But the scene extends, and we see these weird close-ups of the Fibbler as he is leaving the church. Bibleman notices him, and then this happens.
Whoops, we don't look very cheery now, do we?
I don't know, that's just a little creepy to me. It's like the Fibbler is talking directly to the audience, and you realize that you have lost control of your reality. The Fibbler is in charge of reality now. The Fibbler has won, and all hope is gone. This will be the last thing you see before you die. If they were aiming for creepiness and not comedy, then I say mission accomplished. Besides those weirdly eerie scenes, the Fibbler is a standard goofy Bibleman villain. Honestly, I think his design is the most interesting thing about him. The yellow makeup, the red around the eyes, the green hair. It feels kind of thrown together, but at the same time, very deliberate. This episode marks the first appearance of lightsabers in Bibleman. I would hesitate to call the lightsaber fights in this episode great. Yeah, that was the end of the sentence. They function well enough, but it's nothing to write home about. In the end, Bibleman reigns victorious over the Fibbler. Oh yeah, and the Fibbler explodes.
Oh, rats.
What?
The eyes bulging out is what really gets me. I mean, there's some eerie stuff involving the Fibbler in this episode, but this is just straight up disturbing. Don't you dare cross Bibleman, or he will quote Bible verses at you, which may cause you to strike yourself with your own sword and blow up. And this is not the end of weird villain deaths in Bibleman, trust me. There are songs performed in the episode by the youth group kids, and they're fine. They're as non-specific as the ones in previous episodes, though they do end off the show with a song specifically about forgiveness, as I mentioned before. The most fascinating song in the episode is one that plays during Ashley's park moping session. The song isn't being sung by a character within the show, it's just some unknown disembodied voice singing about how they still have hope. I honestly don't know why they included this song here, because it takes up valuable time that could be spent on fleshing out the conflict of the episode. But when these are the types of scenes we get, maybe a song is the better option. The 6 Lies of the Fibbler feels like a step in the right direction for Bibleman, but it is still held back by a flimsy conflict and little character for Bibleman. The showrunners obviously still wanted to have songs in the show, but I still think there are too many in the episode. At least one could have been taken out, I think. The Fibbler functions well enough as a villain, even though I think the whole lying story could have been done a lot better. Still too many songs, still very little conflict, Bibleman's still lame, though he has a lightsaber, and the story needs work, but they're getting there. Sorry I only covered one episode in this video, but I didn't want to make too long of a video this week, as I did have a lot to say about this episode, considering it is a big turning point in the Bibleman franchise. That sounded kind of lame, but whatever. Stay tuned for the next video where we will cover the episode Silencing the Gossip Queen. See you next time.